Hi Stuart, can you tell me a little bit about the inspiration for your work End Dimension?
Yeah, I think the original concept for the piece came from a few different directions, but in regards to the title, the notion of End Dimension really culminated from my readings about geometry, topology, topography in a mathematical context. And I was particularly interested in the notion of higher dimensional geometries passing through the three-dimensional space that we see and know around us. And of course, these particular this particular phenomenon is seen more often in computer renderings than actually in reality. But the notion of high dimensionality and how we experience that was an element of interest in the work.
And did you use those ideas in the way that you constructed the electronics for the piece?
To a certain extent, I actually thought of the speakers as being part of the multi-dimensional space, and in fact even spatial sound I consider as a multi-dimensional phenomenon. I mean, they talk about 3D sound or even 4D sound in some respects, but the notion of sound passing through space in different directions and the way that intersects, I find a multi-level experience, and in that sense maybe multi-dimensional. And similarly, as music has many parameters and dimensionality, pitch, rhythm, or the relation to temporality, and certainly temporality was a major aspect of that exploration of dimensionality too.
And how did you explore that in the relationship between the acoustic and electronic instruments? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because the work starts with quite a prominent acoustic aspect and then gradually seems to be almost overtaken by the electronics and by dimension, like by multi-dimensionality. Can you tell us a bit about that interaction between electronics and acoustic instruments?
Yeah, I think initially, well, the piece started really with the use of the delay line as a kind of integral factor, and I was thinking about the delay as a even though it's it's an audio effect, I was thinking about it as a scored effect in terms of the nature of the notated score itself, as a kind of a prolongation and a spatial element. But as the piece progressed, and in fact initially the latter part of the work wasn't completely clear to me. It was only through the workshopping of the piece in the space that I guess the various options of spatial treatment or the right kind of treatment became clear to me. I certainly had options, and it was in a state of limbo at that point, or it could have turned a few different ways.
Because the piece was premiered in Perth, but then I think we took it to Europe on our tour at the end of 2012, or the end of 2013, that's right. So did that process of performing it in different spaces, like you say, it informed the development of the work. Is that an important part of most of your composition processes? Do you need to kind of render them in reality to develop them and conclude them?
Definitely. I mean, well, for me particularly, with the kind of spatialisation that I'm using, it was, for me, it was a chance to really test and fine-tune, I guess, the parameters, as it were, because my processes of spatialisation are quite customised. They're not, generally used, which meant that, well, I guess in different, in different venues, different systems with different speaker arrangements, configurations, acoustics, all of those factors have a kind of a part to play. So there's always a kind of a need for sound check and a kind of a calibration, as it were, to ensure that the software is operating optimally in the space.
So tell us a little bit about your this kind of treatment, spatial treatment that you use, because I know you've been working very hard on a PhD in the area of timbral spatialisation. So tell us a little bit about that process in this piece.
Yeah, I guess when I wrote this piece, I was maybe at quite a deep stage in the research in timbral spatialisation. The way I've applied this process is that I'm essentially spatialising different spectra independently over a multi-channel speaker system. But there's also a timbral component too, so I can control the relative weights of different harmonics. And it's quite a complex process because as harmonics pass across the space, even our perception and awareness of loudness and of course directionality, that they all they're all part of a very non-linear kind of experience, and I'm very happy with the way that's culminated in a sense. In terms of this piece, I actually used a few different spatial treatments. There was the timbral spatialisation. There was also some swarm-based spatialisation used, and of course the delay lines. I had delay taps allocated to different speakers. Again, to create different zones within the spatial listening experience, and I think to enhance the sense of spatiality. If I was using one process, because timbral spatialisation tends to be quite immersive, it might have lacked the kind of specific directional point source movement so the delay taps really help to, I think I'm trying to be concise here, but as a foreground and a background, that these two elements sort of worked actually quite well together in the scheme of things.
So how about moving a piece like this, which has a multi-speaker setup, to a recorded format? Did you do anything different? I mean, you were the one who's recorded, mixed and mastered the album Tune Darker, which your piece is featured on. How did you go about retaining some of that feeling of the live experience in the recording, or did you just do something completely different?
I did actually. I rendered out all of the audio as per the original. So eight channels, timbrally spatialised, and all the delays, etc. I had to. I mean, I considered some various options. What I actually did, I initially used binaural encoding to displace the different audio tracks. But the problem with binaural encoding is that it does introduce some phase shifts that are not so desirable for vinyl, or particularly in the bottom end. So the mastering was particularly important in terms of ensuring that the phase correlation in the bottom end it should be in the positive. If it falls into the negative, it has the potential of throwing the needle off the groove. And that was a major concern because there's so much low frequency information in all of the pieces. And in conjunction with the concept, the title of the album, I really wanted to emphasise that fact in the mastering, that the low end or the bottom end was, a prominent feature of the works.
So mastering the bottom end for vinyl as opposed to CD, do you think that the outcome, having listened to the record, the test pressings, because we haven't actually got the record yet, I'm going to have to cut that out. But what do you think about the different results orally on LP compared to the CD or ACD?
It does. The colour can change somewhat, and I think as a process of the print, it may be necessary for them to bias or to EQ the audio as a means of retaining the timbral characteristics of the masters that were sent. But I think for CD mastering doesn't really have these limitations so much in a sense. I don't want to say limitations in a negative, that's a bad connotation, but they're just different, and vinyl will have a kind of an inherent sound or a colour as does CD. And in terms of CD, I guess the sonics don't have to be and the spatial imaging don't have to be compromised quite so much. But then again, mastering practice still tends to mono the bottom end, even still with CD mastering. And that does, I think, perceptively tend to make a recording sound more coherent in some respects.
Great. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, no worries.